32 seconds after the hour.
Right on time for rendezvous. This is exactly when they wanted it. Pitch.
17 seconds. Flight dynamics reports the thrust looks good. The roll program has started. Roll program is completed. The pitch program has started.
6 weeks after the launch of Gemini IX, a simultaneous countdown of 2 spacecraft was underway on July 18, 1966 at Cape Kennedy. The final countdown of the Atlas Agena and Gemini X takes approximately 11 hours of integrated operation. At 39 minutes and 46 seconds after 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Atlas Agena lifted off. The primary propulsion system of the Agena inserted the target vehicle into an orbit with a 162 nautical mile apogee. Perigee was 157 nautical miles, an orbit very close to the planned values. Astronaut John Young, command pilot of Gemini 10, and pilot Michael Collins now had an orbiting target for their primary objective of rendezvous and docking. The Gemini launch vehicle had a 35-second launch window. It must launch within 35 seconds of the planned time today in order to meet the mission or be scrubbed. At the very start of that launch window at 5:20 and 27 seconds in the afternoon, right on the nose, Gemini 10 lifted from launch pad 19. From the start, it looked like a good launch. It was to occur on the 4th revolution over the South Atlantic when the crew would be between tracking stations. Of orbital attitude and maneuvering system propellants had been hired and planned during rendezvous. It would require careful management for the rest of the flight. On the second mission day, the command pilot performed 2 more Agena PPS burns to lower his orbit slightly below that of Agena 8. This was followed by the first of 3 extravehicular activities. It was a stand-up EVA by pilot Collins to obtain still photography of selected star groups for astronomical study. At 44 hours and 40 minutes, command pilot Young undocked from Agena 10. He had been docked for almost 39 hours, or for more than a day and a half. The crew had slept twice in this configuration. 2 revolutions later, the 30th, Gemini 10 reported that they were station-keeping with Agena 8. This rendezvous was achieved with a passive target by optical means and backup ground computation. As recovery forces watched, Gemini 10 was sighted. It was lowered slowly over the water by the large main parachute. Rescue helicopters hovered about, and the crew of the Guadalcanal was ready for recovery. The crew elected to be picked up by helicopters. Pilot Collins was the first to be hoisted up.
Launches at 5 minutes past 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As the Agena goes through all phases of powered flight to orbit without incident, the Gemini 11 spacecraft is counting down on pad 19. And the crew, Command Pilot Charles Conrad and Pilot Richard Gordon, will execute maneuvers for rendezvous in their first revolution with the Agena. Gemini 11 is faced with a 2-second launch window. It must launch within 2 seconds of the planned liftoff or be scrubbed for this day. Tracking data now tells us that the Agena is in a near circular orbit with a 156 nautical mile perigee and an apogee of 166 nautical miles. The main engines of the Gemini launch vehicle ignite within the planned 2 seconds. The Gemini 11 lifts off to an M=1 rendezvous. We may imagine that it is a lunar landing vehicle that has aborted its descent to the moon. It is returning to rendezvous with the mother spacecraft. We can get a measure of the crew workload and procedures in such a situation. The Agena target vehicle is now beginning its second revolution. It is slightly more than 200 miles ahead of Gemini 11, but Gemini is catching up at some 500 miles an hour.
Okay, we're spacing, keep them.
Roger, outstanding.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and dock at this time.
Roger, that's okay, and you're go for docking, over.
Gemini 11 had rendezvoused and docked in the first revolution. The earliest this had been accomplished after launch in any previous Gemini mission was the third revolution. 4 dockings were scheduled by Gemini 11, and 4 were completed. Both crew members docked the spacecraft, the command pilot twice and the pilot twice.
How you doing? Oh, I'm here. Huh? I'm here, I guess. Sure are. Right, cowboy. Now, let's just sit here and take a rest. Huh? How you doing? Tired, Pete. All right, just rest. Yeah, you got plenty of time.
At the beginning of the 26th revolution, Command Pilot Conrad received a go for a burn of the primary propulsion system, the PPS of the Agena. He lit the big Agena engine over the Canaries. It added a velocity of 920 feet per second to the orbit of the combined vehicles. The Agena carried Gemini 11 to a new altitude record, reaching an apogee of 739 4/10 nautical miles over Australia. We are 325 miles higher than the old altitude set in July by Gemini 10. The crew remained in this orbit for 2 revolutions. They looked down on Earth with a view never before seen by man.
You got a good view? I mean, it's spectacular. Girl, it's utterly fantastic. You wouldn't believe it.
The flight plan allotted some 3.5 hours to Gemini 11 in this orbit before the command pilot executed a retrograde burn of the Agena PPS. The pace did not slow down. On the 29th revolution, the crew was ready to begin a third EVA for photography from an open hatch. Pilot Gordon shot synoptic terrain and weather photographs of the type familiar from past flights. He also performed an ultraviolet photography experiment. The stand-up EVA ended over Hawaii on the 30th revolution. It had lasted 2 hours, 11 minutes, setting, as the spacecraft communicator put it, a new world's outdoor record. Spacecraft and Agena had been docked since the first day. They had flown together through 3 EVAs and an altitude record, but now they would undock.
See, we're going to hate to leave this Agena. It's been pretty kind to us. Sure has.
After undocking, the command pilot pulled the tether taut. The purpose is to investigate modes of stabilizing a space vehicle during station keeping without using maneuvering fuel. At first, he had difficulty getting a taut line fully extended, and at one point told the ground that it was like skipping rope. Command pilot Conrad then put his spacecraft in a very slow spin of 40 degrees a minute. He made a complete revolution in 9 minutes. Later, at the request of the flight director, the spin rate was increased to 55 degrees a minute. The spacecraft and Agena again stabilized on the tether.
The tether is maintaining tension at all times. I'm impressed.
The tether was released by jettisoning the docking bar on the nose of the spacecraft. The tether floated erratically in space. Gemini 11 was now slightly more than 3 hours from retrofire. Flight plan called for an automatic retrofire and re-entry. The onboard computer would bring the spacecraft in. The crew would jettison the equipment section, but from that point, their job was done, unless a contingency arose. Above the Rio Grande, the spacecraft entered the sensible atmosphere, usually defined as 400,000 feet altitude. It swept down across the Gulf of Mexico. After the blackout of communications ended, Gemini 11 came in with...
Sounds clear, Houston. We're right on the money with an auto.
The prime recovery ship, the USS Guam, sighted Gemini 11 on the parachute. It splashed down approximately 2 nautical miles from the planned impact location. This crew, command pilot Conrad and pilot Gordon, had flown a mission almost precisely to the flight plan. They flew a spacecraft whose systems had no malfunctions which affected mission performance. A new altitude record of 739 4/10 nautical miles, and a record extravehicular time of 3 hours.
On November 11, 1966, the Atlas Agena target vehicle for Gemini rendezvous and docking lifted off the pad at Cape Kennedy. Gemini 12 was now slightly more than an hour and a half from launch. Command pilot for the mission was Jim Lovell, already a veteran of the longest manned spaceflight, 14 days on Gemini 7. In the 4 days ahead, he would log more hours in space than any other man. His pilot was astronaut Aldrin. Liftoff came at 3:46 Eastern Standard Time. The launch vehicle propelled the spacecraft as smoothly as it had in 11 previous flights, and Gemini 12 was headed for an orbit of 146 by 87 nautical miles. crew sighted the target using a sextant telescope at 85 nautical miles. But as the distance decreased to 64 miles, the crew reported erratic radar response. The crew immediately went to a backup rendezvous mode, onboard computations. The pilot bent over his charts, relaying distance and burn rates to the command pilot. He began making his preliminary docking approach.
Is he docked, CSQ?
That's negative flight.
Okay.
Gemini 12, CSQ. Roger, CSQ. We're giving you a go for docking. Roger, thank you. Go ahead. We got dock. Roger.
Gemini 12 was in good position for the eclipse. The command pilot shot time exposures for later scientific study. The stand-up EVA began over the Canaries. The hatch was open at 19 hours, 29 minutes into the mission.
Okay, I've been testing here. It looks like I have a small tendency to float out the Canary middle. A beautiful view.
Following day, a portable handrail was installed from spacecraft hatch to the cone of the target docking adapter. It was left in position to be used Sunday. A major portion of this EVA was devoted to star photography, shooting so-called hot stars, much of whose light is in the ultraviolet spectrum. 80% of this is filtered out by the Earth's atmosphere. From Gemini, astronomers can study data unobtainable from the Earth. After 2 hours, 28 minutes, the hatch was closed and the crew was repressurizing their cabin over Canton Island. Jim Lovell reported, "It was a pretty good exercise, and I'm starving to death." Sunday morning began rather abruptly, shortly after 3 a.m. by the clocks at Manned Spacecraft Center. Flight Director Krantz woke the crew about an hour and a half early to check out fuel cell operation. He took one bulky stack off the line. The crew was then invited to nap a little longer. Waking up early for one reason or another would be a feature of this flight. But the crew seemed to like keeping a farmer's hours. They declined sleep and went to work, taking another bite out of the 14 experiments of the mission. How was it going? Onboard cameras show us that it was going pretty well indeed. Pilot Ulrich moves out the hatch along the portable handrail, which he had installed during the stand-up EVA the day before. He attaches a tether from the Agena to the spacecraft. That tether would come in for some good use later today. Buzz Aldrin was at the Agena workstation. While working, he is attached by a waist tether. This gives him a secure position, and he has both hands free for the job. Tasks, 12 at the Agena station, 7 at the adapter. A good EVA work session.
Houston Capcom, 1 minute to LOS. New EVA record, beautiful job.
That new record was 2 hours, 9 minutes on umbilical EVA. Command Pilot Lovell undocked from his target vehicle 47 hours, 31 minutes from liftoff. He was between stations, between Carnarvon and Canton Island. Command Pilot Lovell is backing off slowly from the target vehicle, pulling on the 100-foot Dacron tether attached to his spacecraft during the umbilical EVA. He will now attempt to extend this tether until it loses all slackness and becomes taut. As expected, that takes a bit of doing at first. The tether whips back and forth and develops loops. But if the command pilot can position these two vehicles on the tether, the one lower as the Agena is and the other higher as is Gemini 12, there will be a very slight difference in the gravitational pull of the Earth upon the two. Small as it is, this difference may be strong enough to stabilize the spacecraft and the Agena. Now Gemini 12 is in its second daylight pass of this exercise. Jim Lovell has his tether extended and taut. He turns off both spacecraft and Agena control systems. The tether remains taut. The tether exercise was ended. Command Pilot Lovell jettisoned the tether. The mission had now lasted 51 hours and 51 minutes. It was time for the crew to separate from their target vehicle. The crew had a third and final EVA ahead of them. It was a stand-up EVA this time, devoted to ultraviolet photography. The hatch was opened at 66 hours 11 minutes. The pilot took ultraviolet photographs of the sunrise and of selected constellations. A 1 minute from retrofire. Mark.
All aircraft are on station as of 1849 Zulu.
The network SRO.
The spacecraft is entering Earth's atmosphere at 400,000 feet. We have a chance to make the last ride down with the crew, looking out the pilot's window.
Fired. 301 down. 301 F, 115 down.
Parachute sighted, in full view of the WASP.
CID Atlantic Chief, from the WASP, I see a yellow-orange chute.
Buzz Aldrin set his record of 2 hours, 9 minutes on umbilical EVA at workstations. The crew increased our experience at tethered station keeping after successful rendezvous and docking. Finally, Gemini 12 added 14 successful experiments to the Gemini program.
Busy day. Thanks much. That about does it. And flight says to tell you good night.